everybody, Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape. It is time for another Make It Monday. Today is Monday, May 31st, and it is also Memorial Day. Therefore, I've pre-recorded a video for you to demonstrate a really cool technique. I hope you enjoy it and are even inspired to give it a try. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. I've been using Stampin' Up! Products for, gosh, many years, making cards for 30 years. And I've been a demonstrator for about 11 and a half years. And one of the things I really like about Stampin' Up! Products is how well they coordinate, but also how versatile they are. And also being part of the Stampin' Up! Group of creative demonstrators, which gives me the opportunity to try different techniques, see them being done. And this is one of those techniques. One of my friends in my stamping group, Joanne Pollock, actually shared this technique a while back. And it's one I've wanted to try. And honestly was a little afraid to try it. And now I regret that it's taken me that long to do it. But let me just step away here real quick and show you what we are going to be working on. These are the cards that I made trying this technique. I will tell you that this is the one I did the first time, and I realized I did it on the wrong side of the embossing folder. I always struggle a little bit with the embossed versus debossed. And then this is the second one that I made, and it is actually the technique. But you know what? Either one of them work. It just gives very different results. Today I'm going to share with you this technique, and I'm using the Simply Zinnia 3D embossing folder. And along with that, I am also using the Unbounded Love dies, specifically this one right here. And then finally, I've used the Happy Birthday Sentiment from the Unbounded Love, which this is a bundle that is available in the new catalog. And initially, I thought I was going to use this frame for my birthday sentiment, and it just didn't pop out enough on the card. But look at, that is this one right here. How cool is that? So anyway, just wanted to share that with you real quick. But let's go ahead and get started with this card. To make it, you need a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 cardstock, scored at 4 1/4. Now the first piece of paper I grabbed happened to be 4 1/4 by 11, and this card will work just fine with that size as well. It's the same size, just rotated differently. And then this is one that opens more portrait style. So you need 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. You need a piece of basic white cardstock for the inside that measures 4 by 5 1/4. And then for the outside piece, I am using a piece that measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then the piece of basic white cardstock that I used for this next layer measures 4 by 5 1/4. And so that just gives me my layers. I wanted a little bit of the melon mambo there to pop my card out, but not a whole lot. So let's go ahead and fold along our score line. And I'm going to use my bone folder. And then just to give a nice firm crease in there. And then let's grab our tape dispenser. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be running out of adhesive partway through this video, but hoping I can make it work. So I'm just going to line this piece up. And I kind of look at opposite corners, and if they're even, these two should be even as well. And at this point, that can get set aside. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. Simply because I like to get all the stamping parts done first and give the ink a good chance to dry. This is one of those cards where there's lots of ink, lots of opportunity to get messy. So if you're one who doesn't like to get inky, I didn't really get too bad, but just beware if you're going somewhere important, you might want to not make this card right before you go there. So I'm just going to stamp my sentiment, trying to make sure I've got it straight here, into my circle. And I'll close that ink up and set it aside. We're going to let that dry, And then the next thing we're going to do is simply grab a piece of scratch paper. We are sponging using our, not sponging, but using our blending brushes on this one. And so you're going to want to make sure that you've got a whole variety of them available depending on how many colors you're using. Now, when we're working on our embossing folders, you get one edge, one side that's embossed and one side that is debossed. This would be the debossed side because it's the raised, and this is the embossed side because you've got the outlines are raised. And here the inside is raised. And I actually want to work for this technique using the debossed side. So I have got Melon Mambo ink, Real Red ink. I've got Old Olive ink, Mossy Meadow. I'm using Daffodil Delight, and I'm also using Pumpkin Pie. So I'm going to start with my lighter colored inks, and I'm just going to ink up, and then I always like to just take a little bit off, and I'm going to randomly hit flowers. Don't worry about staying exactly in the line or coloring everything. If you go off the edge, it's okay, because you are going to be covering it up, as you might imagine, with some of that black ink. I found the leaves were the trickiest part to do, so once I got all my yellow in here, oh, here's a little bit that could use some yellow. I switched over to using my green colors. And the reason I did that is I felt like I could see better where I was putting stuff. So I'm just, like I said, using Old Olive with my blending brush. And that looks like I might have grabbed the Mossy Meadow brush. Well, that's Mossy Meadow too. I think I'm just gonna, yeah, that's Old Olive. Take some of it off so it's not quite as dark. And now I'm just going to come in with the smaller brush, and I'm going to hit some of the leaves. I do generally like to go in a circular motion when I'm using a blending brush, but because I'm working in such tight spaces here, that might not always be possible. And again, especially with the leaves, I didn't mind going off grid just a little bit with those. And now I'm just going to come in, and just to add a little depth, I'm going to use Mossy Meadow. And now you can see why you needed so many different blending brushes, right? And because I'm doing these leaves, I've opted to do my greens in particular in that lighter or the smaller blending brush. And another reason why I've chosen to do my leaves first is then I'm going to be able to cover them up again, some of the flowers, with the darker inks, where I've gone off the edge. And I think I've gotten all the leaves. You can tell that perfection is not what this technique calls for. If you know me, you know that one of the things I like when I'm making my cards is to give cards that have lots of wow to them, but don't take a lot of wow or effort to complete them to achieve that goal. So I'm just coming back through now with my yellow. And that again was the Daffodil Delight. And then I'll come back in using my Pumpkin Pie. And you may have noticed that some of my ink pads are old style and some of them are new style as I'm working here. And I decided that when we did our big color refresh, if my ink pads were still working and I still had refills available, I wasn't going to replace my ink pads. What I am finding is that my ink pads are now getting 11, 12 years old, some of them. And I'm running out of refill. And so that just means that gradually I am coming through now and replacing my ink pads all with new ink pads. So don't be alarmed if you see it that way. The one thing you need to be aware of is that sometimes our re-inkers are designed for the type of pad that you have, whether it's the felt or the foam. And so they don't always take to the re-inkers quite as well. You may get bubbles or something like that. But like I said, I still had re-inkers that went with the pads. And so I am sticking with those. And as they start to wear out, then I go through and I replace them. So my Real Red is one of those pads that finally gave out, and I did get a new one. And this is my Real Red ink. I found there wasn't huge differences in my Melon Mambo and that Real Red ink, but I still wanted just a little bit of that difference in there. And so now when you get done coloring, this is what your artwork is going to look like. It's kind of cool even just like that. If you spritz this, maybe you'd get some watercolor. But the real beauty of this task occurs. I'm using a Memento ink pad. I did recently re-ink this pad, so it is, fresh ink in here. And I am now going to just take my ink pad, and this is where it could get a little messy. And I'm just going to start going over my card. And I like to use, some people do a swiping motion. I've seen it done both ways. I kind of like to go in a circular motion, and I watch to make sure I've got everything covered. And it just makes that color pop. And anywhere that isn't getting covered, I just make sure I'm pressing down a little harder on my ink pad, and I go back over that spot. And now I should have that covered. So that's where you can start to get a little bit messy. I think you can understand why. But we're done. We are done coloring. You saw that I was not perfect in where I put my color. You can see some spots where maybe it ran over. You can tell that I might have even missed a few spots. That's okay. That's part of this technique. It's not going to be perfect, and you're good. That didn't take very long to do, and you've got this beautiful, beautiful piece of paper. So what we are going to do now is come back through with our adhesive. This is a very detailed folder, and so when I do that, I do put more adhesive on the back of this layer, simply because it can tear, or not tear, but buckle up a little bit. And so the next thing we're going to do here is line up, and these are going to have very narrow borders. And I have found that when I'm doing narrow borders like this, sometimes when you're off, it shows up more actually than when you have a slightly wider border. So I do work to make sure I've got a fairly even border all the way around, and it is still not there, so I don't press down hard as I'm lining things up. And this is one where I actually kind of lay it down like this as opposed to going opposite corners. If you didn't want to have to fuss like this, you could easily do 1/4 inch borders instead of these 1/8 inch borders, and then you'd be good. And then because it is still a little bit inky, I'm gonna flip it over just to make sure that I've got it rubbed in. You may want to still use a protective sheet of paper on your work surface. I plan to clean mine when I'm done here, and so I'm not too concerned about that. And then again, because there's a lot of ink on this, the paper's a little damp, and it may, see, I just ran out of my adhesive. It may, just in time, because I don't need any more either. Anyhow, because there's a lot of ink on that layer here, I am going to go ahead and put more adhesive again than I normally would use, just so that I can keep this layer from curling up or anything. Fortunately, I've run out of adhesive. That's not a good thing necessarily, but I do have more. But I actually want to spend a little bit of time cleaning my tape runner too. I was planning to put this up on dimensionals, so that was perfectly timed for running out of my ink. And I am going to use my black dimensionals because I'm putting it against a dark surface. And I am just going to put 3 of these going across here. And I'm putting my sentiment right here. Be careful if your fingers are dirty that you're not touching the front of that sentiment, because you could easily move some ink from your fingers onto the front of that sentiment. And I'd hate for you to do all that work and then have to come back and redo part of it just because of the little inky finger. And then finally we are going to take, I normally tell you to take your pick tool, and I think I know I never unpacked mine from my last weekend. Let me dig it out here. All right. I'm going to grab sticky part, and I'm just going to grab some of the rhinestone basics, and we're going to add a few of those on just to pop a little bit more on this card. And there we go. Again, it's a very easy technique. It didn't take me very long. I'm not quite sure how long my video is, but you know, we're all the way through the video at this point, and the card is essentially done. So this is called, I've heard it referred to as the Joseph and the Technicolor Dream, Joseph Technicolor Dream Coat technique. I don't know if that name has been updated or anything, but I think I call it just the magic card. And it reminds me of art projects where we used to take, back in grade school, you'd color a full piece of paper in color crayon, and then I think we coated the whole thing either with paint. I think it must have been with paint. Maybe it was black crayon. That detail I don't remember. If somebody does, add it to the comments. And then we'd take a tool and kind of scratch out a design or picture into that. There we go. Color thing, and our color crayons would pop up from the background design. Don't remember for sure all the details on it, but it does kind of remind me of something that we did. So again, here is the deboss side. This is the emboss side. I definitely prefer the deboss side for how the card looks. I found that I haven't tried it yet with an all-over pattern card or pattern embossing folder. I have a feeling one that's got some more detail to it, like this one, and an actual design, image design as opposed to just a pattern, may look better. But I am going to try it with a pattern one too and just see what happens. But again, I thank you for joining me this week. It has been a holiday day today, so I am not going to be live, but wanted to share this video with you so that you'd be able to find some creativity to work on this week. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me, and we will see you next week. Hard to believe it's already going to be June 3rd, but I will see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.